Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bioenergetic Basics with me, Danny Roddy, and we're going to talk about where to start with the so-called Ray Peat diet. And before we get too far into it, the true method of knowledge is experiment, and William Blake said that. And of course, in memory of Raymond Peat, raypeat.com. And this episode is brought to you by Kenogen's Progest-E. And in 2018, Ray said, I think it's the only good progesterone product. And you can order it by emailing kenogen@gmail.com, and you can talk to Catherine. This episode is also brought to you by my course, Bioenergetic Basics, and it's more than an hour of action info. And if you like these, you'll probably really like the course. And right now it's on sale for $50 off, so you can purchase it on Patreon and Gumroad. Okay, so in today's episode, we're going to talk about, is there a Ray Peat diet? We're going to talk about if there is a Ray Peat diet or suggestions or ideas. What are the most important elements to those ideas? And is nutrition overrated in general? Do people put too much emphasis on nutrition? So let's first talk about how the idea of a Ray Peat diet is essentially absurd. And I get that I've been in the diet world for 14 plus years, and I get that when somebody doesn't get results of adopting a modality, people will say, oh, you did it wrong. Ray is really talking about something different. A lot of people are talking about diet first, like follow this diet and it should solve your problems. But Ray was not talking about that at all, and we'll get into it more. But this opening up as a quote for how Ray thought about nutrition is probably a pretty good start. So in 2021, Ray said, nutrition is as complex, open, and undefined as metaphysics or cosmology. It's a process of exploring, learning, and figuring things out. It's never a closed book or a finished subject. Also in 2021, he said, I think people shouldn't eat things that damage them and should eat things that taste good and provide the essential nutrients while making them feel good and function well. Is that a diet? And so I pulled up this quote from 2015 where he was conversing with somebody about how he ate differently in Mexico than he did in the United States. And I remember reading this and it really having a big impact on me. Things started to click after reading this quote. He said, you asked me my favorite foods. That depends on whether I'm in Coeneo, where natural foods are available. In the US, I eat the few things that are safe: milk, eggs, cheese, orange juice, oysters, crabs, squid, zapotes, pawpaws, and chirimoyas when they are available. In Coeneo, I like chicharrones, roast chicken, bacon, various barbecue things. And so this takes Ray's ideas about nutrition more of like a don't injure yourself with the foods available. Try to seek out foods that are relatively well digested, contain a good amount of nutrition, and aren't dangerous. I think this is funny given all these ideas about nutrition in the health sphere of people trying to create an optimal diet where Ray is saying, just try not to get poisoned. And I think that's a lot different than a lot of people are contextualizing their diet recommendations. And this is also from 2021. And I think this was a podcast when it was just me and him in the beginning. Given how complex everything is and everything's a moving target, how do you even approach the subject? And Ray said, with what you've been doing and how it has worked for you, if you've been living on sweet potatoes and pork fat and you're doing okay in middle age, then you don't see much need for a change. And I say, would context change if somebody's writing an email saying, hey, Ray, I have a low pulse rate, a low temperature, a high cholesterol, constipation? Is that what makes the suggestions in context with what the person is explaining? And Ray said, yeah, all those things point to hypometabolism, low thyroid function. So to boil down everything we just talked about with the concept of the Ray Peat diet, I think the real Ray Peat diet is you have to learn to know what your body needs at any particular time. And that goes beyond nutrition. Things like thyroid or vitamin D or escaping your stressful environment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so simple, non-damaging nutrition. How do you engage with nutrition in a practical way? This is just my point of view. My 4 things I suggest investigating. 1, if a person is adopting new nutritional ideas, I don't think they're ever going to last if they're not satisfying. So I think satisfying nutrition is incredibly important, and utilizing foods in your area. And then more specific, carbohydrate to protein. So eating more carbohydrate than protein. What the number is, I don't know. Maybe 4 or 5 plus times the amount of carbohydrate to protein. This also depends on appetite. Low appetite can be from hypothyroidism. I feel most comfortable saying generally higher carbohydrate than protein. And calcium to phosphorus. So this can be calculated on something like chronometer.com. And for a woman or a man, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of calcium per day. And that's been shown to lower parathyroid hormone, which we'll talk about. Then the inclusion of supplemental foods like eggs and oysters and liver. I would think a person is 70% the way there with just these things. The elevator pitch for carbohydrate is when a person does not eat carbohydrate, they will melt their tissues to provide the amino acids to produce the sugar. And so it's much easier just to eat the carbohydrate and suppress the glucagon, adrenaline, cortisol, all the hormones, aldosterone, estrogen, prolactin, all the emergency hormones that are mobilized in the face of low blood glucose. And so it's not a good deal to have to rely on these systems that are fat mobilizing systems that have degenerative consequences. And this paper from Logero, they say, taken together recent findings of well-known important glucocorticoids glucocorticoids to feeding and energy balance, and the modulatory actions of carbohydrate ingestion on both basal and stress-induced activity of the HPA axes strongly suggest that many metabolic and psychological pathologies, which often present together and have been associated with stress and HPA dysregulation, might in part be understood in the light of our new view of glucocorticoid feedback. Availability of simple carbohydrates such as sucrose provide a highly energetic, immediate, and utilizable substrate that seems to be important during times of stress. This may explain why stress stimulates preference and craving for nutritive carbohydrate. Another reason to eat more carbohydrate than protein is everybody knows protein can stimulate insulin and lower the blood sugar, so it's generally advised to eat more carbohydrate than protein. Eating like a 1-to-1 ratio or 2-to-1, that might be cutting it way too close. And so this quote from Duffy, they say not only must sufficient protein be provided, but also sufficient non-protein energy, i.e. carbohydrates, fats, must be available so that the carbon skeletons of amino acids are not used to meet energy needs. So the third thing we talked about, the calcium to phosphorus, why is that important? Well, it turns out that when a person eats a low amount of calcium, say they're drinking a few cups of milk or eating some cheese, they're getting like 500 milligrams of calcium every day, it's way easier to get an abundance of phosphate. And you can calculate this in chronometer.com. Just eating a bolus of phosphate, which you're going to do just eating food, it's very difficult to balance that with calcium unless you're seeking milk and cheese to balance the phosphate. And so this Fujita paper in 1991, they say calcium deficiency through stimulating parathyroid hormone secretion tends to blunt such difference by paradoxically increasing calcium concentration, soft tissue, and intracellular compartment. So this means that when you don't eat enough calcium, you increase the activity of your glands that release the parathyroid hormone, and that breaks down your bone. And the skeleton act as a reservoir for calcium, and then the calcium is going to move into the soft tissue. And so they say calcium supplement, especially with highly biological available active absorbable calcium, was associated with suppression of parathyroid hormone secretion and normalization of such blunting and intercompartmental distribution of calcium examples in hypertension and diabetes, with evident improvement of clinical manifestations and laboratory tests. So many different problems can result from a lack of calcium because the parathyroid hormone increases the release of fatty acids into the blood. It can turn on nitric oxide. It can activate aldosterone. And so just getting enough calcium, like getting enough carbohydrate, are very powerful anti-stress or anti-inflammatory strategies for somebody that's not doing well. And in 2021, I asked Ray, is parathyroid hormone the final common path of stress? And he said, yeah, the angiotensin system is very close to it, but I think that's the right way of seeing it. And to circle back around to the benefits of carbohydrate, especially sugar, the fructose component of sucrose helps to reduce plasma phosphate levels by 30 to 50%. And then one other benefit of sugar is that it's digested high up in the intestinal tract, and it does not make its way down to the bowel where it can feed things like fungal and bacterial infections. And the last thing that I think is important, as I mentioned, is eating eggs, liver, and oysters relatively often, maybe every week or every 2 weeks or so. And this is an old paper from 1932, and they say there's increasing support for the view of dietary deficiencies can best be corrected by proper selection of foods rather than by use of artificial concentrations or medical mixtures. And from 1961, they say, in general, hyperthyroidism has been shown to increase the need for many dietary essentials, whereas hypothyroidism appear to ameliorate many dietary deficiencies. If marked changes in endocrine balance can induce or aggravate dietary deficiencies, optimal dietary supplementation should help to alleviate the resulting clinical picture. And then Adele Davis in 1954, she said, liver of all varieties appears to be the richest source of the anti-stress vitamins. And if you're interested on how to prepare these foods, I do have some videos, really old videos on YouTube of how to prepare oyster soup, making liver and chopping it up real small, maybe putting it through a blender and making it really tiny and mixing it with ground beef. There are ways to do this that are not offensive, and you just have to experiment in the kitchen. I don't know anybody that can't mix liver with ground beef and then make a taco out of it, because I don't think the opposite of taking supplements, I don't think it's the same thing. In fact, it can be extremely harmful. Okay, so let's talk about the last thing. Is nutrition overrated? I think this is what Ray really offers. I think he offers a huge, broad view of health, and it's not just eat this diet and see how you're doing. You know, this should solve your problems. I don't think that's a great approach. I think that's impotent for the problems that we face today. Anybody that says, I ate the Ray Peat diet and I gained some weight, blah, 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 they're complaining about something that essentially does not exist. You know, so that's not the idea here, is to eat a diet and then to cross your fingers and hope that it works. That's not the point of this stuff. So the idea is to increase the pulse and temperature. And by the time a person is 20 or 30 or 40, that is considerably low. And eating more calcium or eating carbohydrate can sometimes help bump it up, but a lot of times it can't. A person could go get lab work. They could test their pulse and temperature. They could test their Achilles reflex tendon. And so it's just one tool in the toolbox. So again, you just know somebody's not really getting it if they're saying, hey, I ate this diet and it didn't work for me. But anyways, so is nutrition overrated? I think so. And to pull out some quotes to support that idea, Ray said in 1985 in Mind and Tissue, he said, the environment in a sense is a completion of the organism's structure. So what does that mean about us, that our disgusting, sick environment? Like, that's part of us. You can't negate it because you're in it. If our environment fails us a little today, our needs will be much greater tomorrow. And so again, think back to your childhood of things happening to you when you're born. imperfect development, imperfect parental relationships, brother, sister, school, etc. I mean, so much bad stuff could happen to a person. And so a person has to factor that into the problem that they're experiencing. And here's Ray talking about it in 2019. He said, despite the presence of all required nutrients that would be adequate for someone with generally supportive environment, a good diet won't necessarily be adequate for someone with a problematic environment or a history of stressful experiences. And to beat the point into the ground, this is 2021, I say, our environment is so awful that maybe just even taking thyroid isn't enough of a defense from the onslaught of metabolic problems we're faced with day to day. And Ray said, yeah, even thyroid and milkshakes and quesadillas aren't always enough to make up the horrors that are imposed on us and some of the natural defects of the environment. So that's it. That's a short one today. I just wanted to clarify that. Anyways, this show is brought to you by Kenogen's Progest-E. You can order it by emailing kenogen@gmail.com. Like I said, my course is $50 off for September, and you can purchase on patreon.com or Gumroad, and I'll have links below for that. And people like this course. If you like these, I think you'll like it as well. Guys, I have an amazing audience. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.